This episode of Superconnectivity is brought to you by Tweaked Audio. To get awesome headphones, go to tweakedaudio.com and use the coupon code Southgate to get 30% off, free shipping, and a lifetime warranty. Or you can get there through the link on our website, southgatemediagroup.com.
Hello and welcome once again to Superconnectivity. I'm your host, Charlie, the Professor Esser, and with me as always is...
Phil me and Parrish.
Hey, Phil. Well, good news, Phil. Loyal listener, Kenneth Smyson wrote us back this week. Ken, I really hope you took a minute and listened to our... Listen to Phil, Lilith, and I's review of X-Men Apocalypse, because that is what Ken wrote to us about. And Ken, we are largely in agreement, as Ken writes. Well, I suppose it's better that I've been too busy to write back with my immediate reaction to X-Men. In short, I had some serious rose-colored glasses on after my one and only viewing. I so strongly desired to see the oft-referred 90s aesthetic brought to the franchise. Although, to be fair, Ken, this was supposed to be the 80s aesthetic. So, like, the next one in the 90s, that'll be the one. That'll be the one that'll be good, theoretically.
Yeah.
Yes, the offer brought to the franchise that allowed a few great moments to fool me into thinking this movie was great. Those being 1, the Quicksilver team, 2, Weapon X, 3, Phoenix, and 4, anytime Nightcrawler was bamfing. Those were pretty awesome. Well, the bamfing part. I'm going to agree to disagree on Weapon X. I've since carefully replaced my critical brain in my skull. Sadly, it was just an okay movie. The acting overall was good to great. Unfortunately, the script the actors were given wasn't much. Aside from the aforementioned scenes, the action was rather uninspired and dull. Most of the time, my biggest gripes with the movie are Magneto didn't need a new family, yes, to die. He already has plenty of dormant motivation to be activated. Quicksilver should have told Magneto he was his son. That was the entire point of his arc in finding his dad. It would have been an emotional moment for Magneto to realize he has family. Saving it for later was a weak attempt at universe building. Jennifer Lawrence's dislike for her beauty, and I agree. And honestly, the whole Quicksilver's my secret dad thing was it was a corner the writers wrote themselves into. So I give them. I understand why they didn't have him reveal it, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but then you shouldn't have written yourself into that dang corner. Jennifer Lawrence's dislike for her blue costume undermines Mystique's entire Mutant and Proud arc she's had for the last 3 movies. Yeah, a little bit. I can understand not being fully nude, but in any scene with other mutants, she should have blue head with clothes that the character covers herself in. Of course, the whole thing with anytime Mystique makes clothes for himself, she's still naked. She's just made her naked body look like clothes. She's not actually clothed, which is something I was waiting for someone to make a comment on. Mystique, you're still naked. And Kenneth's biggest problem, how does Mystique not know or acknowledge Nightcrawler as her son? I mean, blue-skinned female and teleporting male with a tail, blue-skinned teleporter with a tail, just saying. In summary, the franchise isn't dead, just needs some freshness. The already Deadpool and X-Force stuff will help. As always, looking forward to your next podcast. The whole Mystique and... Yeah, I mean, the thing about that whole thing is, so you don't have to have them say, "Oh, you are my son. I am you are my mother." You don't have to have that. But at their first meeting, there wasn't even, because those who remember, they actually meet when Senator Kelly is almost assassinated in the last movie by the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Yeah. And basically what it is Nightcrawler sees her, and he's the one who says, hey, we're both blue. What's up with that? Now, in their defense, it seems to be a thing in this universe that they're building that mutants are blue.
Yes, because Beast.
It's like, well, Beast, I turned blue. Mystique was always blue. Apocalypse, he's blue too. You know, and it's like, okay, I guess mutants are blue in this universe. And for what it's worth, Nightcrawler and Mystique have different shades of blue, whereas in the comic books they're both covered with a slight blue fur. Here they have different shades of like actual blue skin. I think they actually, for what it's worth, I think Jennifer Lawrence would have preferred to have the freaking blue fur. Just have that nice little. I'm sure it's real hard to do, but quite frankly, they could have done it. They could have figured out a way. In fact, quite frankly, they could have done something really neat with practical effects, trying to give her that velvet look, that covered in very fine blue hair. I think that would have been cool. But honestly, I kind of think they kind of blew their effects budget on this because Beast didn't look that good in general. And the whole Beast has, honestly, it's like Beast being blue with a beard isn't that impressive to me.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm Beast and I'm a hipster. I've got mutton chop beards and I'm blue. It's like, yeah. Kenneth, I'm largely in agreement with you on this whole thing. I mean, we can all always, find that, if you just headcanon it like this, then it makes sense. And of course you can headcanon anything. That's the glory of superconnectivity, is you can headcanon it. You can totally headcanon anything you want and make it work. You just got to hammer all those pieces into place. But generally speaking, I think this is one of the things that probably Fox is having a problem with, is they want to have this super connected universe. But they built a super connected universe, it was like any other, and the X-Men are a marquee property. So they don't have a lot to fight for, is the idea, is that, people are going to come see an X-Men movie because it is really a marquee property. It's one of the best properties that Marvel has. It's diverse, it's expansive, it's interesting. And it starts off with a team, with a really easy origin of, I am Professor Xavier and I am building a team, they started with for what it's worth, you had a couple of basic problems. The first is that when they started in the later X-Men, it wasn't like the X-Men existed as anything other than, and this is our first mission kind of thing, Even though there's like maybe this implication that they've had other missions, you don't get much there. And then they decided, well, Stewart and I'm so bad on names today. I don't know why I'm blanking on everyone. Stewart and McKellen getting long on the tooth. Let's tell some origins. And here I think is one of the, this is a thing for me, okay? They decide they're going to go back to 1968 and tell this first-class story. Okay. It's a bold choice, but then they're going to jump forward to the 70s and now the 80s. Rather than just doing this as a costume drama based in the 1960s universe, like I said, as I've said, Warner Brothers almost got the rights to Captain America, and I think that would have completely changed the DC cinematic universe, because then they could have done a 1940s story of Captain America, tied him into Batman, done the Batman Captain America 1940s story, and build out a costume drama universe set in the 40s with all these great golden era heroes. And then expand out as they grow into the 50s and 60s, all throughout that entire arc of DC Comics to get into, when you get into that 1970s and the Watergate era, and you can even get into a kind of a Watchmen-esque deconstruction of that golden age heroism, that would have been awesome. They didn't do that. Here, they had this opportunity to sort of set mutants in that 1960s world and kind of tell these ongoing tales with McAvoy and Fassbender, and let them grow into Stewart and McKellen, and they didn't, because they're going to have them jump 10 years every issue. And you can always do something about how mutants don't age at the same rate, which is basic Jim Shooterism. This was something that Jim Shooter always said, is like, mutants and superhumans and people living in this world, they don't age at the same rate. So you can have this connected world going back to the late 60s all the way to the 80s, and you could argue that it made sense. The 25 years between Fantastic Four #1 and the Silver Anniversary, you could force it all to make sense in a real world structure. But they didn't do that, and they're not going to do that. And it's not going to be old man Logan. We've seen some photos, and it's like, middle-aged Logan, which is its own thing. Middle-aged Logan, because now apparently he ages at a normal rate. Because yes, he's been eternally young for the first 200 years, and now he's getting gray in his beard. Although, for what it's worth, when I first noticed the gray on my beard, it was like, wait, where did that come from? That who has, wife? Did you dye my beard hairs platinum while I slept? Why did you do that? No, it wasn't her. The X-Men universe is what it is. It's much like the real X-Men universe. It's riddled with time travel and somewhat disjointed for the casual viewer. One hopes that they can find a way to correct that, and we'll see what choices they make. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on any more thoughts on the apocalypse of the X-Men?
I was gonna say no. I think we covered it pretty good in this special. Everyone should go download that. But
yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Just the whole thing. I don't know how good of a plan that is, that every movie jumps ahead a decade, because unless you're going to put your cast in makeup to make them look older every movie, it's going to kind of look weird that by the time we get to the next movie, it's going to be 30 years from First Class, and no one's going to really age except for different hairstyles.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can age, and they've already X-Men Hair Origins. They've already balded up McAvoy, and yeah, I don't know. I don't know why the balding of McAvoy was. I mean, here's the thing: it's not like you had to bald McAvoy because Stewart was bald, because Stewart's been bald for like 30 years. He can go bald at any time.
I think it's more because Professor X in the comics was bald.
Yeah, yes, obviously, but it's like trying to create a reason. Here's the thing: Professor Xavier was always bald in the comics. He never had a tragic moment where he lost his hair.
Didn't they do that at the end of First Class? Is they made it seem like his hair was falling out at that point, like naturally?
You know what? It's been so long since I've seen First Class.
Yeah, but I swear they
gave it all back to him in Days of Futures Past. So.
For the 70s,
yeah. So for what it's worth, I mean, but like in the comic book, yes, he was bald, but he was bald since he was a kid. That was like sort of part of his mutation, was that he didn't really grow hair on his head. I mean, I think that when you see like the flashbacks to him and Kane Marco as kids, he was bald, I don't think he had like a little page boy then. I think he had a shaved head, or at least a bald head. So you could either do it like, Professor X just likes to shave his head because he's like all cool like that. He's way ahead of the times. He's doing the whole Kojak. which would not have been out of place in the 60s because, hey, Yul Brynner was a cool guy in the 60s and he had a shaved head. It's like you didn't have to give McAvoy a luscious head of hair, except for the fact that McAvoy has a luscious head of hair. And he's like, hey, I got a luscious head of hair. And probably his agent says, we ain't shaving it. And they didn't want to do a bald cap. So, except they did a bald cap for this one. So I don't know what to tell you. Why Professor Xavier ever had hair, I don't know. Like I said, he's never had hair in the comics. I don't even think when they gave him hair in the movies that they ever gone back and given him hair in the comics. So it's like, I understand you can take liberties in the movies and. And certainly, when John Rhys Davis was the Kingpin, he didn't shave his head. Although he said, "Yeah, I'm down for it." His agent said, "Don't shave your head, John." And he's like, "Oh, what do I care? It'll grow back. I have hair." But he says, "No, we'll do it. We don't want you to shave your head. We'll just have you be a balding Kingpin," which was fine because John Rhys Davis carried the Kingpin. I felt very nicely, even though he didn't shave his head. But having a moment to have him lose his hair, it just seemed weird. Like so much in this, it just seemed weird. And the Quicksilver scene was great, as we will all say that. Although I also kind of felt that it kind of looked really. I don't really feel like they had I don't think they had a good special effects budget in this. I don't know. The special effects just did not seem strong to me. But that, I don't want to dwell on this. We went over this already. Let's talk about some interesting news in the world of the actual Marvel Cinematic Universe. Phil, did you see this?
What?
Who is going to the principal of Peter Parker's high school?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't see this.
Okay, so Kenneth Choi has been hired to be the principal of Spider-Man's high school. And this is interesting because Kenneth Choi is not unknown to the fans of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He first started in Captain America: First Avenger as the character of Jim Morita, an added member of the Howling Commandos. They added a few members to give them, a more up to date cast, so that Although you still have you actually have two black guys in it instead of just one, and now they've added an Asian, which is nice. But they have Jim Morita, who was nice, and Jim Morita also made an appearance in Agent Carter, I believe, and I believe his character returned when they had the Howlers show up in that one as well. And this is interesting to me for a very simple reason. If Jim Morita was one of the Howling Commandos and Kenneth Choi is playing in this, could he be related to that Howling Commando? And if we are going to say he is related to the Howling Commandos, we have seen in the television universe this idea that the children of the Howling Commandos have shown up in S.H.I.E.L.D. throughout its existence. You have Triplet's character they didn't say who he was the son of, but they suggested he was the son of one of the Howling Commandos. And then if Jim Morita's character, if Ken Choi's character is related to Jim Morita, and he is too as an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., could he be the new Coulson? Because as we know from the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, when Spider-Man's all superpowered up, his new principal is one Philip Coulson. Because S.H.I.E.L.D. has decided to keep an eye on the superhumans showing up in New York City, and what better way to do this than as the principal of a high school? And what makes me... I wonder if this is their idea, that they're going to introduce that Jim Morita is, or obviously not Jim Morita, Kenneth Choi, who is going to be like, Bill Morita or Steve Morita or something. One of the original Howlers who has stuck around or whose children have joined up in S.H.I.E.L.D. If they're going to have him be a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, are they going to be reintroducing S.H.I.E.L.D. through him in the cinematic universe so as to maintain separation of the cinematic universe from the television universe, which would not be cool, but is a possibility. Or is this going to be the first volley to reintegrate them back together? So if this character is going to be called out as S.H.I.E.L.D. in it, as the principal of the high school, are they going to start reintroducing it? Maybe they're going to have, what I'd love to see is a great end credit scene, maybe where Melinda May shows up with a kind of choice character to get the report. Because you can just sort of see this whole thing where all throughout it, Kenneth Choi's character is just riding Peter all the time, being your basic 90s principal character where he's like, Parker, well, you've got to buckle down, Parker, you're being a dumbass, that kind of thing. And then at the very end, you have Melinda May walk into his office and says, Agent Marita, give a report, and that would be pretty awesome. That would be pretty freaking awesome. Especially if, as Clark Gregg has suggested, if we find out that May is the new director. Clark Gregg in a recent interview said, now, here's the thing. He didn't say May is the director or May should be. He said, I think May would make a good director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Because I don't actually think when they end these seasons that they necessarily know what's going to be in the next season. I think they often have a vague idea, and maybe they know who they want to be the director, or maybe they've got if we have this person be the director, we'll take this angle. If we have that person be the director, we'll take this other angle. Because I do think that I think that sometimes we overwrite the future of these shows more than the writers. I think the writers have ideas, but they haven't settled on anything yet. But Clark Gregg did say that Melinda May would make a good director, and I do think that that's the most logical choice, is to go with Melinda May as the director. And if they do that, and if we do get a tie-in with Homecoming, where we get a reveal in the end credit scene that Kenneth Choi was S.H.I.E.L.D. the whole time, and he's reporting to Director May, that would be pretty awesome. I think that would be great, because I think May would make a great director, and I do think having that tie-in back to the television universe, especially if Marvel is going to try to more integrate the television and the cinematic universes, because they are doing that big Netflix expansion.
I think it would be pretty cool if he became the go-between character for everything. If he's in Spider-Man: Homecoming, then we see him on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. at least for an episode or two, and then even if he makes a quick cameo in one of the Netflix shows somewhere.
Yeah, that would be awesome, and that's what they do need, because they do need a Phil Coulson. They need to have someone that can be that everyman, everywhere character. The way that Phil Coulson was in Thor, and really build out that S.H.I.E.L.D. presence again, because not for nothing, on the TV series, since Captain America, S.H.I.E.L.D. has been gone. Since Captain America, Winter Soldier, there has not been a S.H.I.E.L.D. Phil has been saying, "Oh well, we're still S.H.I.E.L.D. There's still S.H.I.E.L.D." But really, we see that S.H.I.E.L.D. is like six guys in a room. Yeah. We never really see that expansive S.H.I.E.L.D. We don't see a Triskelion anywhere. And if we're going to get to that point of rebuilding in next season, now that S.H.I.E.L.D. is opening, now that they're operating more in the open, maybe we can get to that idea that S.H.I.E.L.D. is a thing again. Oh, yeah. And having Melinda May be the head of it, and then maybe we can get back into that reintegration. For what it's worth, Doctor Strange drops in September. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. comes back in September.
Wait. No, Doctor Strange doesn't hit till November, I think.
Oh, November? Okay, well then for what it's worth, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is back in September. Doctor Strange is in November. That's a lot of time for them to, have S.H.I.E.L.D. reintegrated, to have them come back into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And if it's not Phil as the head of it, you can always have someone else from S.H.I.E.L.D. come in. You can have that connective tissue, Mm-hmm. You don't have to have Samuel L. Jackson, but, like I said, Ming-Na Wen would be a great character who could just show up there and be the person that stares you down. You know?
Yeah. And you would think they would want to reform Shield because maybe someone's like, okay, well, most of our Avengers are renegades now, so we need a
Yeah, well, I
peacekeeping
mean,
force.
well, and for what it's worth, that's one thing that we've said, that when we get into the second season of Shield, I mean, the introduction of the LMDs, the creation of an LMD, it really speaks to the idea that I think they're going to create a Squadron Supreme.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Squadron Supreme is that's the perfect way to introduce them, because they're inorganic superheroes in this situation, which means that they're going to be superheroes, but they're going to be designed to be superheroes. So they're going to have all these golden age-y tropes to them. They're going to be in the spandex, and they're going to be acting and looking like superheroes. They're not going to be billionaires in iron suits who flip up their masks. They're going to be these magical beings, and I think that would be and I've said I really, it is my profoundest hope that they explore something with the Squadron Supreme. And like I say, for what it's worth, the Squadron Supreme, for the most part, are all characters that you can do relatively inexpensively. The only character that they might introduce through the LMD plotline who would not be cheap to do is the Human Torch, if they actually bring back the original Human Torch, which I would love for them to do too. I mean, I think everyone since that Easter egg, everyone's been waiting for Jim Hammond to come out of the glass, and that of course is a perfect thing for Phil does when the Squadron goes rogue. I know, and they say we need someone who can help, and he can say, I know a guy, and just dig up Jim Hammond. That would be awesome, but of course that guy on fire effect is expensive.
Well, unless you have him not use his powers for most, look at Firestorm and Legends of Tomorrow. I mean, if you don't have him flame on for most of the season, I mean, I guess you could do it. Plus, if they retcon it where he was in World War II, in the comics, I mean, you can even throw out that whole, Captain America's no criminal. He's the best man I've ever known. You could get those references to Civil War.
Well, and I mean, your smartest thing to do with that is to just have what the original thing was, which was that every time he's exposed to oxygen, he bursts into flames. And yes, he can control it, and that makes him a powerful weapon. Mm-hmm. But then what you have is Fitz and Simmons engineer the micro force field that allows him to turn the fire off. And then you can have Jim Hammond walking around in his red suit, and then when he needs to, he just flames on. And that would be an interesting aspect, and then you don't have to have him on flame. But anytime you have him flame on, that is not cost effective, and so you can only do that thing every so often, and that gets you. And the problem with it is like with Firestorm, it puts you in a situation where we all forgot we had powers, It's like anytime you put him in this situation, wouldn't you just flame on in this situation and that solves the problem, so that's the only problem to that. But the rest of the Squadron, if you do the Wizard, if you do Power Princess, heck, even if you do Hyperion, it's not that expensive to have a guy fly. It's not that expensive to give a guy superhuman strength, because it's actually done. I mean, laser eyes is the only thing that'd be even slightly expensive, but they can do laser eyes cheap nowadays. You just draw in the lasers. It's not like you have anyone, shape shifting. That's an expensive effect, especially if you decide you have to paint them blue. But yeah. So that's the hope of that. That is the very real hope of that. That we'll get a reintegration of the Marvel universe. If we can get if there is going to be a tie back to Homecoming and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that would be fantastic. And we could even introduce that'd be a great if you want to have Kenneth Choi be an agent in Doctor Strange, that would be awesome. I mean, I hope we get our first sense of Doctor Strange in there. Although, like I said, I mean, Hey, you know what? You know what, Marvel? You've been getting all this flack for whitewashing in Doctor Strange. End credit scene. Melinda May, director of Shield, shows up in that in almost a duplicate of the Iron Man ending scene where you have Doctor Strange.
Oh
He's in his Sanctum Sanctorum, and then all of a sudden everything goes dark. And he's like, "What's
Yes.
going on?" And out walks Melinda May and says, "He says, Doctor Strange, Doctor Strange." She has to call him Doctor Strange because that's his name. Like you haven't called him Steven, but that's a little informal. Doctor Strange. You just stepped into a universe that's much, much bigger than you have any idea. Which even has this greater depth to it if you think of it within the sense that, Stephen Strange, you just discovered magic. Let me tell you what S.H.I.E.L.D. has been hiding for the last 200 years,
Mm-hmm.
That would be awesome. So, and I'm going to tell you this right now, that you put Ming-Na Wen, director of S.H.I.E.L.D., showing up recruiting Doctor Strange into the Defenders. You've got a whole nother bag of hammers.
Mm-hmm.
And you can, and that's the thing is like Ming-Na Wen's director of S.H.I.E.L.D. You could slip her into the end of Luke Cage. You can bring her into the Kunlun saga with Iron Fist, and that leads her to, and that you can do a little retro thing where that's what gets her turned on to Doctor Strange because he's off in Tibet at that time, or not Tibet, Nepal. And you can really just dig into this whole thing in this great way, and address a bit of that Asian erasure issue that people have with the Ancient One, by saying, yeah, we didn't make the Ancient One Asian, but here's Ming-Na Wen, and she's going to be in everything now. She is the new face of Marvel. She is our new Nick Fury, which I'm down for. I am so down for that. Yes. So what else is in the Marvel Universe news this week, Phil?
I don't know. Did we get any more news this week?
There's not a lot of news in the cinematic universe. I mean, obviously the big news is Civil War 2 in the comic book universe, and there is a lot of criticism out there of the Civil War 2 plotline. Now, as I've said, I think the real depth of the Civil War plotline is not that there is this inhuman who can predict the future, as was addressed in the most recent Hercules, Gods of War issue. Precognition is not a new power. Mm-hmm. Although, for what it's worth, it hasn't really been a power among superheroes that much. When you think about precog, you can give characters like Destiny. And really, I mean, aside from Destiny, is there any other really famous precogs out there? Usually they're more diviners than precogs,
Yeah.
You can always say, Doctor Strange has some precognition through various divination rituals, using tarot or other items, and we'll see that occasionally among magic users. But the idea, and so there is a difference in what Ulysses is doing. Is Ulysses is constant and consistent and accurate so far. Mm-hmm. However, as Tiresias says in Gods of War, it's divination isn't as easy as it seems like it's going to be easy, but it usually comes to dross. So it's going to be interesting to see how Ulysses plays out. But like I said, I really think that what the thematic of it is going to be far less about, we can predict the future, we have to change the future, and more along the lines of what Tony might say, which is, but what if people are going to die if you change the future? Because that's essentially what happened. And yes, Tony has guilt for not upgrading Rhodey's armor. And that's his impetus in here. But I think there is this deeper question of when you change the future to prevent one tragedy, how do you now not know that you're going to create a bigger tragedy? One of the things that we saw in Age of Ultron is that, yes, you can prevent the Age of Ultron, but what if by killing Hank Pym, you effectively create the Age of Doom and Morgan Le Fay? Mm-hmm. What if something completely different happens that is somehow worse than what we got under Age of Ultron? Now, arguably, Age of Ultron was actually worse because in the Age of Morgan Le Fay and Doom, New York was still a place, the superheroes were still active and fighting. Really. So as a zero-sum game, you're in a dystopia, but it's a less of a dystopia than what you got under Age of Ultron. So, just to call a shelter having an entrenching tool, it wasn't perfect, but they did find a way to have the best of all the worlds and figure out a way around it. Because of course, and I think that was kind of maybe the thematic, I think that's actually kind of a thing that you'll get in these stories. If you think about it, that was the real gist of Age of Ultron. And that was in its own way the gist of the recent Secret Wars, which was that it's not that you can't change the future, or it's not that you can't fix the problems, but that you need to be willing to take the time to think it through. And of course, as Reed said, he wouldn't have been able to have had the time to think it through had Doom not taken his actions. Had Doom not created his, tin-plated dystopia, Reed couldn't have come in later and saved the universe because Doom gave him the time to do that. And arguably, Wolverine killing Hank Pym gave them the time to sort out a way to fix the problem when they would go back in time. So, however you want to slice it, I mean, there is this, there's this constant moral question in these books about what are you going to do with all that power? And the answer is we have no freaking clue. Because that is the answer. We don't know. We're not any smarter or wiser than anybody else, but we have these powers. And we got to do something with them because we can't just sit on our hands and say, oh, well, what if what we do has the wrong effect? As much as knowing what's going to happen is a power, the fact of the matter is you don't know what's going to happen after that anyway. And I think that's going to be our final resolution in this, is that, it's going to come down to it. It's like, if we have this knowledge, we have to act. What if it causes something worse to happen? Well, then we don't have that knowledge, and we're back in the same place, And that's the thing, is like, you never have knowledge of the future, because if you are given knowledge of the future, you've immediately changed the future. And when it's a Celestial or it's a Thanos, you know what? Maybe it's worth using that intel. But the fact of the matter is, until you get something really solid and good, it's not worth using, because, you're not, when you say, what if I saw the Hulk kissing Ultron? Well, let's ask the Hulk if he's been speaking to Ultron. Maybe that you don't have to attack the Hulk just because you had a vision of him kissing Ultron and a baby popped out. Which was, by the way, one of the best Ralph Wiggum's references ever I've seen in a comic book. Those who don't remember that actually is a Ralph Wiggum reference when Tony Stark says that. It's like, what if he says, I had a vision of, and I saw the Hulk, and the Hulk was kissing Ultron, and a baby popped out. When Mrs. Krabappel and Principal Skinner were briefly dating, and they got caught in the closet kissing. That was what Ralph Wiggums told his father, because he just sort of elaborated on what he saw. He says they were kissing and the baby popped out and the baby winked at me. It was a delightful little Ralph Wiggum reference in Civil War. from Tony Stark. Which, if nothing else, highlights the ludicrosity of the Civil War concept. And I think that's maybe enough connections for this week. What do you think, Phil? We've tied in The Simpsons. Once you say,
yeah, we're down the Ralph Wiggum. Yeah, I think we've hit it.
Well, it's like they say on South Park. Simpsons did it. Phil, if they would like to talk to you, as our good friend Kenneth Smyson often does, with you and me, how can they reach out to you, Phil?
If you would like to tell me that you would like to nominate Charlie Esser as the new head of S.H.I.E.L.D., you can always email me, nightwingpdp@gmail.com, and on Twitter, I'm at nightwingpdp. Most of my social media is on nightwingpdp.
Okay. And, of course, if you'd like to write to me in that old-fashioned email way, you can always do so at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And, of course, you can tweet along with me as I live tweet The Incredible Hulk, 7 o'clock Eastern Time on Saturdays on MeTV, or when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. come back, or Legends of Tomorrow come back, or this new Preacher show, which I hear is all the rage. If I can find out when that show's on, maybe I'll start watching and live tweeting that.
Sundays at 9.
Well, there we go. Now I know. You can always follow me at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. And, of course, listen to our other podcasts. All New Marvel Roundup, World's Finest, Before the Bat, the Gamma Cast, all on the Southgate Media Network. And until then, connect with us again.